roughly 25,000 years ago, in the Upper Paleolithic, someone made this in a cave in France. Whoever did this was part of a Salutrean culture. But what was this carved for? Wait, what are these two big words? Solutrean, Paleolithic, sounds a bit up your own wind, right? I'm Benjamin, and let's explain what these two words mean first so we can better explain her. Now let me know what your name is down in the comments with a fire emoji next to it. Let's jump into this video, starting with the Paleolithic. The Upper Paleolithic stretched from 50,000 years ago to about 12,000 years ago, and began after Neanderthals had gone extinct, making we humans alone in Europe. This age lasted until we started farming animals. So this is a hunter-gatherer society, but they are moving herds around to kind of control their activity, sometimes pinning them in wide valleys to forage upon them for a while. They even possibly have fishing nets. But we don't know. Nets tend to rot away, don't they? However, carvings of people, animals and things into wood, bone and stone last longer. But what does the word Paleolithic mean? Paleo is from Greek palai, meaning long ago, far back, ancient. Cognate, actually, with Welsh pech, meaning far, and lith is from ancient Greek lithos, meaning stone, and maybe from Greek plaques, meaning a flat tablet, which itself is cognate with Welsh llech, meaning slate. The ic ending makes it descriptive of, which matches exactly to Welsh ig, the adjectival ending. Now what about this word Salutrean? There were several major cultures across this long Upper Paleolithic era, the last part of the pre-farming Stone Age, such as the Aurignacian culture across Europe, Lebanon and Israel. But then these cultures began to break up. The Magdalenian culture, a bit later across Western Europe. The Azilian culture in southern France and northern Spain, which was remarkable in its designs. These cultures shifted and grew over tens of thousands of years. The Salutrean culture was one of these. But what does the word Solutrean mean? It comes from La Roche de Salutre, this rock here, a bit further east than where the lady was found. The land around it has been lived in by humans for over 55,000 years. The present name came from a Gallo-Roman villa below named Salustreacis in Latin, the name itself probably being a fusion of Latin and Gaulish. A Paleolithic site was found near the rock from the age around 22,000 to 1,700 years ago, doing things with chalky bones and ivory, and the culture of the local flintwork was named Solutrean in its honor. This Salutrean culture was found in France and the Basque country, but also Catalonia, Spain and Portugal. This culture thought up a new tool-making craft, a new style called pressure flaking. This created a new kind of ridge along the blade. This made lightweight flint you could throw faster and a more lethal jagged edge. But also, for the lady we're talking about, this meant they could cut bone more finely. This culture saw a change from flint to bone, which means they became better at carving things and able to make art no one had seen before. This advance in flintworking craft would be lost after them and not done again for thousands of years. So these people innovated a technology that was far ahead of its time. I mean, it's a long time ago. Used it, expanded their territory, and then it was lost. In French, she is called La Dame de Brassempouy, the Lady of Brassempouy, or the Dame à la Capuche, the Lady with the Hood. She is what we call a Venus figurine. The name Venus, celebrating our European culture's heritage and ideas of femininity, comes from the finding of the immodest Venus, found in 1864 by a rather stylish fellow named Paul. This man and this figurine here. This became a genre, the Venus figurine, for Neolithic feminine carvings. However, Our Lady, La Dame de Brassempouy, was found in 1894, 30 years later, in a cave by Edouard Piet, whilst he was looking in layers of earth belonging to the Solutrean period, where he found a cluster of shards and remains of ivory and bone, which was a bit odd, because they weren't sure they had the ability to work with bone yet at this level of sophistication. He realized this had likely been made of woolly mammoth ivory. Which meant it had to have been made before they went extinct in Europe by 14,000 years ago. But what made this carving so unusual was the detail in her face, and that she may be wearing a veil. This could be some type of knotted hair, but it seems to be a layer of some kind over her. Could this be the oldest carving in the world to show in a realistic shape a human being wearing clothes? It is for sure one of the earliest human faces to have a faithful likeness to life and flesh in real dimensions. Randall White says, since her discovery there has been a general assumption that this minuscule head was a fragment of a broken figurine. In other words, that she had a corresponding body. In actual fact, it is difficult to imagine how the fractured surface that runs along only a part of her posterior surface might have connected head to body. Moreover, in profile view, a kind of inferior projection or tab, unbroken and intact, can clearly be seen. This projection resembles a similar feature on the double statuette from Gagorino, actually two figurines in the course of being sculpted, that apparently served as a finger hold for the sculptor. And seeing all of this, after having studied Gagorino, I wondered whether the small fractured surface might simply have been an accident during the sculpting of a self-standing head. With this in mind, I turned my microscope on the fractured surface itself and at once observed that its surface bore the distinctive marks of stone burins. I just need to indicate what burins are. These. This is sophisticated for the epoch, and it's telling of how they constructed this thing. He goes on, in other words, after the fracture, an attempt had apparently been made to recover by reworking the fracture itself. My guess is that too much material had been lost and the piece was abandoned or used as is. The cave looks like it has been used as a workshop for ivory. So what he's saying here with this figurine, as compared to other Venus figurines, is you usually get a figure with a nice bosom of boobs and a protruding butt, a sexual thing going on. But what looks like here is intentional, focusing on the upper body, the face, the detail around this veil. This is unusual. It's indicative of more of an artistic expression, potentially, and it means that something different is going on here. Something in which the style of sculpture is changing. Maybe this was an actual person that someone was in love with, trying to etch out a gift to someone. We don't know. Let me know down in the comments what you think. However, what we do know is we've not found anything else quite like it. There's some significance in that. Is this a survivor? A lone survivor of a whole grouping? Or was this an experiment? And that fracture was the result of trying to do something new for the first time that didn't quite work out, and because it was thrown out within a sheltered position of a cave, it just by fluke luck survived down to us. Piet, Chalot, Duard, and Dobré have raised the question as to the sex of the Brassempouy sample, but I agree with Randall White that in nearly every case in the 5,000 years, that is a long time, that this Salutrean culture existed. In nearly every case where human anatomy is preserved, it is female, and this is an exceptional piece of human anatomy being preserved. These men clearly had enough respect for their women to admire them. A question does arise when looking at her eyes. Does the Dame de Brassempouy have eyes? The answer technically is no. But the impression of her regard or her gaze was made by playing between her overhanging brow and the deeply gouged inner corners of the eye sockets. Depth and shadow were made by gouging deeply into the corner of the eye socket and then dragging downward with force, creating at the same time the slanting angles of her nose. The tool used here, at least, was likely not a burin, but rather a pointed flint tool. At least in the case of her left orbit, the heavy traces of this work were then scraped away. So why focus on this tiny figurine, a partial figurine, a head from 20,000, more than that, years ago? I want to say 2 or 3 things about this. First of all, we Europeans have an inheritance that we need to protect and value. I look around at our society today, and our Western heritage is being belittled. We're obsessed with other cultures rather than our own. And we have a duty to safeguard the inheritance that has been passed down to us. Our ancestors clearly valued women in a way that we're only beginning to understand. This veil suggests an appreciation of modesty, of beauty, as being something worthy not of being hidden away completely, like not trapping women in a bedsheet, but modesty, respect through self-respect. Granted. And this was made of bone. The slanting angles mean they had to know which direction the growth of the bone was. Otherwise it would splinter and shatter. That seems really simple to us today, like you're going to break a bone sidelong to get longer strips. But for someone coming out and doing this in the Stone Age, that was brand new technology. This was something that took an incredible amount of thought. It's not something that's easy to do if you have no prior knowledge of different material types. And for you who are watching this, do you like Neolithic stuff? Do you want more earlier historical stuff? Let me know. And if you did like this video, watch this video on the Cucuteni Tropillian civilization, because that's a bit later, but of the same flavor, I hope. We'll see you next time. Diolch yn fawr iawn yn gwylio.